Welcome back, friends. In today's session, we are going to continue with our topic of gaseous exchange and respiration. And today we have the session 12 of our respiration subtopic. So in today's session, we're going to discuss about the structure of adenosine triphosphate, which is ATP. So ATP is the energy carrier of the cell, the energy carrier molecule of the cell. So the molecule which is responsible for carrying energy within the cell. So today we'll discuss its structure and its significance within the cell. So adenosine triphosphate, which is ATP, is the short-term energy store of the cell. Short-term energy store of all cells. Now, this is important for you to know. Short-term energy store of all cells. It is important for you to know because ATP, it is present in all cells, and also they require ATP to perform different functions which are active. So some of the processes they are passive and they do not require ATP, but some of the processes they are active. That means they require the use of energy. Now we are saying that it is easier transported and therefore the universal energy carrier. Sometimes ATP can be defined as the energy carrier of all cells. So kazi ya ATP ni kuchukua energy. Ikisha kuwa produced in the mitochondria, it carries energy to where energy is required. So that's why in the cells which require a lot of energy, such as muscle cell and liver cell, they have abundance of ATP for production of energy, and such energy is used within the same cells. Now let's discuss about the structure of ATP. The terminology suggests ATP means adenosine triphosphate. So we'll have adenosine and then we'll have 3-phosphate. ATP is formed from nucleotide adenosine monophosphate by addition of 2 further phosphate molecules. So we have a nucleotide which is adenosine monophosphate, and this nucleotide which is adenosine monophosphate, that means it is made up of adenosine and a monophosphate. Now what makes up adenosine? Because monophosphate is a phosphate, but what makes up adenosine? Adenosine is made up of sugar and organic base. So adenosine monophosphate, which is AMP, is a nucleotide. A nucleotide is made up of sugar. A nucleotide is made up of, this is very important for you to remember, nucleotide is made up of sugar and then made up of base and phosphate. Sugar, base and phosphate, 3 components, they are making up a nucleotide. So in AMP, the sugar is ribose and the base is adenosine. So we have ribose sugar, then we have adenosine, and from there we have phosphate. So ATP has 2 extra phosphate groups, making a total of 3. So ATP has 3 phosphate group, a sugar which is ribose and a base which is adenosine. So in terms of structure for ATP, this is how ATP tend to appear. It is how ATP tend to appear. So as you can see, here is our phosphate. So we have 1 phosphate here. This is 1 phosphate. Here is another phosphate, and here is the 3rd phosphate. So is the first, the second, and then the 3rd phosphate. Here is the ribose sugar, and here is our organic base, which is adenine. So we have adenine and ribose sugar. This unit is what you can call as adenosine. This is adenosine, and here these 3 phosphate is what you call as triphosphate. So here we have 3 phosphates which make up the triphosphate. Here we have the adenosine, which is made up of ribose sugar and the organic base adenine. So from there, this is another simplified structure of ATP, made up of the ribose sugar with 5 carbons, then adenosine base, and then 3 phosphates which are together or commonly they are grouped together, they are called as the triphosphate. So the group from here to here, this is called adenosine. If we categorize from here, it is adenosine monophosphate. Then from here it is adenosine diphosphate. All three, they are adenosine triphosphate. So let's continue our discussion in the next page about the structure of ATP and how ATP it is used in the body, about the structure of ATP and how it is used in the body in the next page. Now, as how we have seen the structure or the introduction to ATP and its structure, now let's see the significance of ATP in the body. Why is ATP important in the body? Now, in terms of our significance, the hydrolysis of ATP to ADP is catalyzed by the enzyme ATPase or adenosine triphosphatase. Now, this ATPase and the removal of the terminal phosphate yield 30.6 kJ per mole of ATP. So hydrolysis of every mole of ATP releases 30.6 kJ of energy. Now, further hydrolysis of ADP to AMP yields a similar quantity of energy, which is 30.6 kJ per mole. But the removal of the last phosphate to give adenosine produces less than half this quantity of energy. Now, what we want to discuss here is that hydrolysis of ATP releases energy. However, the removal of the first phosphate from ATP releases the first and the second phosphate from ATP to yield AMP releases high amount of energy, which is 30.6 kJ per mole of ATP, as compared with the removal of the third bond or the third phosphate from AMP to produce adenosine itself. Now, for this reason, the first two phosphate bonds are often termed high energy bonds on account of the relatively large quantity of energy they yield on hydrolysis. So from what we discussed in the structure of ATP in the previous session, as we said that structure of ATP can be drawn like let me draw the structure of ATP here. So the structure of ATP can be drawn like let's say here is our ribose sugar, and then from there here we have the adenosine base, the adenine. Here we have the adenine, here the base adenine, here the sugar, and here we have three phosphates, first phosphate, then second phosphate, then third phosphate. Now from there, what we are saying here what we are discussing here is that from our molecule, I want to illustrate this what I am explaining here. So from our molecule we have three phosphates. We have the first, the second, the third, or we can start from peripheral, the first, the second, the third. Now, the removal of this phosphate releases 30.6, and this phosphate releases 30.6. But the removal of this phosphate releases lower amount of energy. So these two phosphates, that means the breaking of this bond releases this amount of energy, and the breaking of this bond releases this amount of energy. So these are called as high energy phosphates. So this doesn't imply that the whole energy of ATP it is stored in these bonds. The whole energy it is stored in the whole molecule of ATP. However, the breakage of these bonds stimulates or initiates the release of the energy which is stored in the whole molecule from ATP. So that's the very important concept for you to know when we are continuing with our discussion of our gaseous exchange and respiration It is very important for you to understand that. So what we are saying is that for this reason, the first two phosphate bonds are often termed as high energy bonds on account of the relatively large quantity of energy they yield in hydrolysis. Relatively high amount of energy they yield in hydrolysis. So this is misleading in that it implies that all the energy is stored in these bonds. No, it doesn't imply that all the energy is stored in these two bonds. The energy is in fact stored in breaking of the energy is in fact stored in the molecule as a whole, although the breaking of the bonds initiates its release. So the breaking of these bonds initiates the release of energy from the molecule. That's why we are saying that these two phosphate bonds, they are high energy phosphate bonds. High energy phosphate bonds. Now, AMP and ADP may be converted to ATP, but these involve a certain reaction. AMP and ADP may be converted to ATP by addition of phosphate molecule. So if we add a phosphate molecule to AMP, we make ADP, and then addition of phosphate molecule again from ADP to make ATP. All of these equations, all of these reactions, they require energy. So addition of phosphate molecule is called a phosphorylation, of which there are two main forms. We have photosynthetic phosphorylation, which occur during photosynthesis in the chlorophyll containing cells, and we have oxidative phosphorylation, which occur during cellular respiration. So photosynthetic phosphorylation is sometimes called the photophosphorylation because it requires light. So we have photophosphorylation and oxidative phosphorylation, which occur during respiration. So ATP can be converted to ADP and inorganic phosphate. ADP and inorganic phosphate. This reaction releases energy, which is 30.6 kJ per mole of ATP. So ATP plus water, hydrolysis reaction releases ADP and phosphate plus energy. So the reverse of this reaction will also require energy. If we are moving from right to left, the reverse of this reaction will require ADP, phosphate, and will also require energy. The reverse of this reaction will also require energy. So as you can see here, the reaction requires water. The reaction of breaking down ATP requires water. So the reaction requires water and is described as a hydrolysis reaction. This is the common type of biochemical reaction and was encountered many times in the biochemistry. So hydrolysis reaction is a commonest reaction in biochemistry and occurs in different number of cells, in many cells. Now the third phosphate group is split from ATP, and this phosphate remain in the cell in the inorganic form. The reaction releases 30.6 kJ of energy for every 1 mole of ATP that is hydrolyzed. Now, one among the very important concepts for you to remember is that the phosphate which is removed doesn't go out of the cell, so it remains within the cell. Presence of energy from respiration will cause the reverse of the reaction to occur and ATP to be produced again. So ADP and phosphate can be converted back to ATP. The addition of each phosphate molecule requires 30.6 kJ of energy per mole of ATP. So the reverse of the reaction can be written as 30.6 kJ per mole, then plus ADP plus phosphate, inorganic phosphate. In the condensation reaction, we get ATP plus water. So the reaction is categorized as condensation because it involves the removal of water. This reaction releases water and is known as condensation. So if energy released from any reaction is less than this, which is 30.6 kJ, it cannot be stored as ATP and is lost as heat. As I told you before kwamba energy inayokuwa stored kwenye ATP, excess yake inakuwa lost as heat. Kwa kama any reaction may take place within the cell, and that catabolic reaction may release energy which is less than 30.6 kilojoule per mole, then what will happen ni kwamba hiyo energy itakuwa converted kwenda kwenye heat, itakuwa stored as ATP. So this reaction releases water and is known as condensation. If energy releasing, yeah, we have already discussed this. Now putting the two reactions together, which is the one which uses ATP and the one which produces ATP, the reversible reaction can be seen like this: ATP plus water hydrolyzed to get ADP and phosphate. And the reverse of the reaction is ADP plus phosphate plus energy to get ATP plus C plus water. Now, the enzyme which catalyzes this reaction is known as ATPase. All cells requires energy, as already explained, and also is in every kind of organism use ATP as the energy source of energy when performing their work. Now ATP is known as the universal energy carrier, or the energy currency of the cell. Now, if we are discussing about ATP, think about all uses of a battery. A cell can be, an ATP can be regarded as an analog of a battery. As useful analog of a battery, think about all uses of a battery, which you can put a battery in different uses. So by thinking about all uses for battery, you can think how ATP can be used in different categories of cell. Now, how could you get light energy, mechanical energy, sound energy, and electrical energy from the same battery? How can you get all of these forms of energy from the same battery? Now, if you are starting thinking about how can you get different kinds of energy from the same battery, is where now we can know, oh, ATP stores energy, and this energy can be used in different kinds of process in the cell. So now let's see in the next page how this goes. And as we know that you are using different kinds of energy in the cell, and also finally you can recharge the cell. You can recharge the battery. Some of the battery, they are rechargeable. So finally, it's the recharging of the battery once the energy has been used. So once ATP has been converted to ADP and inorganic phosphate, and use this energy, the ADP, and can be converted back to ATP by entering the process of respiration and receiving more energy from oxidation of more organic molecule. So the actual amount of ATP, I think I've jumped to one page here, so let me find the page and let's discuss about the analog or the convenience of ATP to the battery first before jumping to other concepts. So the convenience of a battery is that the same source of energy, which is the battery, can be used in a wide range of ways to perform work. It is merely plugged into the right place of apparatus. Now in this page we will discuss how ATP, its mechanism of functioning, it is similar to how the battery works. We can plug the battery in different apparatus, maybe in a torch, and if we plug a battery in a torch you get light energy, and if we plug a battery maybe in a motor we get a mechanical energy, and different categories of energy they can be extracted from the battery. Now ATP does the same in a cell. It can be used to make muscles contract, to make nerves function, to drive active transport and the synthesis of protein, and is used in all other works of the cell, has to do by being plugged into the correct piece of machinery. So ATP is the energy store of the cell, and it can be plugged in the correct piece of machinery. By plugging it in the correct piece of machinery, it can release different categories of energy which are used in the cell. So the analogy can be extended further because batteries have to be made in the first place, and some, like ATP, are rechargeable. So some of the batteries they are rechargeable, but some of the batteries they are not rechargeable. So when batteries are made in a factory, energy has to be used in their manufacture. Likewise, ATP is made using energy. ATP is made using energy. So even batteries, energy is used to make batteries. However, there are energy carriers which carry energy to different kinds of machinery. So synthesis of ATP uses energy. That's why we said that 30.6 kilojoule per mole of energy is required to synthesize 1 mole of ATP. Likewise, ATP is made using energy in case from oxidation of organic molecule. In our topic of respiration, we are discussing the synthesis of ATP from oxidation of organic molecule. However, in photosynthesis, we discussed that we have a synthesis of ATP from the photo respiration. I mean from photosynthetic oxidation, that is photophosphorylation. So in the manufacture of ATP, the equivalent of factory is mitochondria. So as we know that batteries they are made in factory, in the synthesis of ATP, the equivalent of a factory is mitochondria, a specialized site where chemical assembly lines for efficiency producing most of ATP in aerobic respiration are located. So in the mitochondria, it's where different materials, or it is where the assembly of materials for production of energy tend to take place. Now let's move to the second part, which is we are continuing to discuss how ATP is analog to the battery. Finally, there is recharging of the battery once its energy has been used, and once ATP has been converted to ADP and the phosphate and leave this energy. So the ADP and the phosphate can be converted back to ATP by re-entering the process of respiration and receiving more energy from oxidation of more organic molecules. So that is what we can categorize as recharging of ATP. Recharging of ATP is how ATP can acquire energy from mitochondria and can be formed again. I mean ADP in the presence of organic phosphate can acquire energy from mitochondria and reform ATP again. So the actual amount of ATP in the cell at any time is surprisingly small. ATP should therefore be thought of not as a store of energy, but a carrier of energy. Long-term storage of energy takes place in molecules like fat and glycogen. So ATP is the temporal store of energy, and that's why its amount in the cell is variable and it is small. So the cell is very sensitive to the amount of ATP present. As soon as the rate at which it is being used goes up, the rate of respiration goes up as well to keep up the supply. Kwa rate ya kutumika kwa ATP inavyozidi kuongezeka, ndivyo ambavyo rate ya production of ATP also increases. So the importance of ATP is therefore the means of transferring free energy from energy-rich compounds to cellular reaction requiring each, or to cellular reactions which require energy. So this is important because in absence of ATP we would lack a molecule which could act as the energy carrier. So while not the only substrate to transfer energy in this way, it is by far the most abundant and hence the most important molecule to transfer energy within the cell. So now let's discuss about the uses of ATP within the cell. uses of ATP, within the cell. Let's discuss about the uses of ATP within the cell. Now, as we said, different processes in the body require ATP, and these are some of the very important uses of ATP within the cell. Now, a metabolically active cell may require up to 2 million ATP molecules every second. Metabolically active cell. ATP is the source of energy for first is anabolic process. Anabolic process ni zile process ambazo zinakuwa zinatengeneza vitu, so they involve synthesis of different materials in the body. For example, protein synthesis, polysaccharide synthesis, DNA synthesis. All of those are DNA replication. They require ATP, so it provides energy needed to build up macromolecules from the component units, such as polysaccharide synthesis from monosaccharide, protein synthesis from amino acids, and DNA replication. All of those, they require energy. Second is movement. Movement, when we are performing different movement within the cell or from inside to outside of the cell, they may require the use of ATP. So it provides the energy for many forms of cellular movement, including muscle contraction, serial action, spindle action in the cell division. So as you can see here, we have muscle contraction, serial action, and spindle action. All of these, they require ATP. They require ATP in order to occur. Also, we have active transporter across the cell membrane. Active transport requires ATP, so it provides the energy necessary to move materials against a concentration gradient or ions as pumped. We have secretion. It is needed to form vesicles necessary for secretion of all cellular products, such as ATP produced by mitochondria. Is used in the presynaptic membrane to release the vesicles out of the presynaptic membrane. Also, ATP is in the activation of chemicals, such as in the glycolysis. Before the process of glycolysis starts, we must activate the glucose molecule using ATP, which is called as phosphorylation. So we activate the glucose molecule so that it will become more reactive. Now this marks the end of our discussion with the structure and significance, together with the uses of ATP in the cell. In the next session, we'll be discussing about the respiratory substrates. We'll discuss about the respiratory substrates and the structure of mitochondria. The respiratory substrates and the structure of mitochondria. If you need these notes, you can visit the Kipaji app and you can download these notes. You can buy these notes for a very low cost. Thank you, and later wish you nice studies.